Yeah, so as Gordon said, my name's Alex. I'm in my 4th and final year at university here at the moment. So just a little bit about me before I start speaking. So I'm from the UK and I'm also from Australia, but I spent most of my life in Dubai. That's where I was brought up. So this year I'm, like I said, in my final year, and I'm focusing on my research dissertation on the body condition of grey seals in the Farne Islands in Northumberland. So I've got a little picture there on the end of me and one of my course mates when we were doing some of our research. So this last year I was on my placement year, so that's sandwiched between my 2nd and final year of uni. So I didn't actually undertake any studies while I was away. I was more going out doing my own kind of work. So I decided to split it in 2. So I did 6 months in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, working at a koala sanctuary. And then I did my other 6 months in Ireland, working with grey and common seals. So I've got a lot of cute pictures to show you guys today. So that'll be the main thing you'll be looking at rather than looking at me. So first of all, what is Seal Rescue Ireland? So SRI is essentially it's a seal hospital located right in the bottom of Ireland in an area called Wexford. So they focus on the 3 R's. That's rescue, rehab, and release. So my placement took place towards the end of Jan, beginning of Feb, until July time. I started as an animal care and conservation intern. And around my 2nd month, I got promoted to education manager. So I'll give you a little bit of background about the different kinds of seals in Ireland, and then I'll go in to tell you the kind of work that I undertook during my placement. So there's 2 species of seals in Ireland. There's the grey seals and the common seals. They're very different, even though they look quite similar, so I'll point out some of their characteristics. First of all, grey seals tend to be a lot larger in size than common seals. Both these pictures are of seal pups, because at SRI we only have the capacity to take in seal pups. That's purely because grey seals can actually get up to around 300 kg, so that would be quite hard to transport a seal of that size into the rescue centre. And looking after a grey seal is also quite difficult because they can be quite feisty and aggressive creatures. As you can see on the left, they've got quite long noses or long muzzles, and they've got parallel nostrils for grey seals. Grey seals are also born with a white fluffy coat known as lanugo. So they have this coat for the first around 4 to 6 weeks of their lives, and they stay on land during that whole entire time. So that fluffy coat isn't actually waterproof. So they stay with their mum during that period, and then gradually over time they start shedding that coat, and then they're able to go into the water and fend for themselves. Grey seals tend to be quite loud, quite feisty, like I said, and they also lack that maternal care that common seals possess. So the picture I've got on the right here is of one of my favourite common seal pups. This was the first seal pup of the season that we had in around, I want to say June time. So they do get up to a large size, but it's around 150 kg, so around half the size grey seals can get up to. They tend to be a lot smaller, they have a smaller nose, and their key feature is that they've got V-shaped nostrils. So that's the easy way to tell these 2 apart. And they're not born with a white fluffy coat, so they're born with their lovely waterproof coat, so they can go straight into the water from when they're born. They're quite slow learners. They do tend to stick with their mother for a longer period of time as well. That also makes them more docile in their nature, so they were actually a lot calmer to deal with. I've got a video which I'll show you later of me actually holding one up because I knew it wasn't going to be able to bite me, compared to the one on the left that easily could and has bitten previous workers at SRI. So why do we rescue seals? There's lots of reasons why we should rescue wild animals in general, but for seals, they're known as something called apex predators. So that essentially means, well, in Ireland, anyways, they have no other predators, so they're actually the top of the food chain. So without these guys, everything underneath them, that whole balance of the ecosystem would fall apart. They're also known as a key bioindicator species. So that basically means if there's a problem within our environment, for example, if we've got bad water pollution, that will affect the seals, that will come out in their skin and their coat and the way they act. That's a huge tell to us humans that there's something wrong in the environment and there's something that we need to change. And then finally, the most important one, which we look to at SRI, is the duty of care. So essentially, a lot of the threats that seals face in the wild are as a result of human disturbances. So we have a duty of care to help prevent these issues in the wild and to take them in and help them get better. So I'm going to be talking about a couple of the key threats that seals face in the wild, and then I'll go through the process that we do to mitigate them. So one of the major issues we see is plastic pollution. So here I've got a picture of Kelpie. Kelpie was one of the first grey seals that I looked after at the centre. Don't worry, he's not a weird kind of species of seal that turns green. We actually had to spray him green. It was a disinfectant spray. That's because, as you can see around his neck, he's kind of got a wound. I don't know if you guys can see it very clearly. Well, he came in with a monofilament netting wrapped around his neck, and it was lodged so tightly when he was a pup and when he grew that actually we had to go into his skin to cut it out. So that's why it kind of left him with that mark, and that's why we had to spray him green as well. We also got a lot of other seals coming in. Some get trapped with fish hooks in their noses or in their eyes, or some come in with netting wrapped around their flippers. That's purely because seals are really opportunistic hunters. They're really curious animals. So if they see something floating around the ocean which they think is food, they'll stick their little muzzles in there and then they'll probably get stuck in some of the netting. And they do this thing called a barrel roll, which is their attempt to get out of the netting. It's when they flip round, but in time that's actually more entangling them more and more within the netting. And then as they get bigger, as they get more blubber, they become more engrossed within the netting. So we see a lot of that, unfortunately. The majority of the time, we're able to take them out of the netting, and then they're able to recover, and then they can be released. But we do get some cases of seals coming in. They seem fine. They may seem slightly emaciated. We'll be able to rehab them. Then towards the final stages, we have had seals pass away. And any seal that does pass away in our care SRI, their body gets taken to the University College of Dublin, and they do something called a necropsy. So it's essentially like an autopsy, but for seals. So one of the first seals we had, called Karma, she was doing really well. She was a grey seal, but she unfortunately did pass away very suddenly. And one of the interns noticed that she was doing a really weird behaviour in her kennel. She was almost doing press-ups. She just kept slamming her stomach against the floor. And we didn't know why, and then she passed away. But when we got the results of her necropsy, it turned out that she actually had a crisp packet stuck within her stomach. So that was kind of almost acting as a plug, so we weren't able to put any of the nutrients into her properly. It's really hard, obviously, to tell without doing any internal exams on them. One of the other threats seals face in the wild is illnesses. So seals are very similar to humans. They can get sick. They can get a lot of common illnesses. They can get something called seal pox, which is something I saw a lot at the time. It's when they have little white spots all over them. They can get herpes, and they can get several parasites as well. This is normal. A lot of wild animals have them. A lot of the seals that came into our centre, we just had to put them on a treatment to try deworm them a lot of the time. And we also had to quarantine the pox seals or the herpes seals from the other ones, because it can spread very quickly within the resident population we had at the centre. And like I said earlier, water pollution can heavily affect seals, especially in Ireland, because the water system over there isn't as developed as it is in the UK. I've got a little picture there of my favourite seal. This is a common seal called Finton. He was actually, I called him my baby, because I looked after him quite a lot of the time. He was doing really well in our care, but as you can see, he is very, very skinny. Like, he's got quite a pronounced neck, which isn't really a sign of a healthy seal. And I promise you, I won't be telling just sad stories today. I've got some happy stories, but Finton also did pass away very, very suddenly, and it turned out that he had really bad pneumonia, and he'd had a mix of other lungworms and tapeworms within his stomach, which, again, as much as we can give them medication to flush out. Sometimes it's so bad that they die of it, unfortunately. We also did see a lot of seals coming in from some bad injuries. A lot of the time that was from bad storms. So in 2017 in Ireland, they faced Hurricane Ophelia. And that was the first ever time that they actually had to shut their doors to seals coming in. So I think in that year they had around 66 seals in their care. So the centre was completely overpopulated. There's about 12 kennels at the centre and 4 pools. And as you can imagine, it was absolutely full of wild seals everywhere. But the majority of them were able to be rehabbed and released, which is fantastic. I've included 2 pictures on the screen there, 2 of the seals that I worked with. As you can see, the one at the top actually had a broken jaw. He came in, but he did really well throughout our process and was actually able to eat whole fish really quickly, which was fantastic. The one at the bottom isn't a seal that I cared for, but this is a picture I got sent from the rescue centre. Unfortunately, the severity and the frequency of these bad storms is increasing, unfortunately, due to climate change. Emaciation is also a threat that seals face in the wild. This is probably one of the main threats I witnessed over my time. I've got a picture here of a very, very skinny seal. But they do rely on their blubber a lot of the time for thermoregulation. And if they lack this protective layer, it could be quite detrimental to their health going forward. As it also says on the screen, grey seals have one of the highest fat content in their milk. So if the seal was separated from its mother too early and they weren't able to get that milk, that could also quite badly affect their rehab process as well. The final one I'm going to talk to you guys about today is orphaning. And we see this a lot of the time during the common seal pupping season. So the common seal pupping season is around summertime. Here I've got a picture of a seal called Ken that came into our care around that time. And he was unfortunately abandoned by his mum. It's hard to know why. Quite a lot of the time it is due to human disturbances. I think that's because if someone was walking along the beach and they saw a baby seal, sometimes if they saw a seal that wasn't in the water, a lot of people get involved and they'd actually place the seal in the water. And if grey seals, like I said earlier, had that lanugo coat on and they were put in the water, unfortunately they can't swim with that coat on. And because seals have quite a hands-off parenting approach, if humans do get involved and harass the pup, the mothers can end up abandoning them or orphaning them as well. But at SRI, we are able to take them in and help them and hopefully release them into wild. That is the main aim. Like I said earlier, we do the 3 R's. So stage 1 is the rescue. So the way it works, across Ireland, we've got a network of just over 1,000 volunteers spread across the whole entire country. So all these volunteers are trained through us. They're just volunteers. They don't actually work with us, if that makes sense. But if a member of the public came into contact with a seal and they noticed it was in distress, it was injured, or it was sick, they'd call our rescue hotline, which is going 24/7. They'd give us a little report of the seal, how big it is. We'll tell them to step away. They'll take some videos and some pictures for us. And then we'll have to pass all that information on to our animal care team. And then our animal care team will decide if that seal does need to be brought in straight away, or if we need to monitor the seal for a couple of days or a couple of weeks before we actually decide to transport it into the centre. A lot of the times we do have to act straight away, and if that's the case, we'll get in contact with a rescue network volunteer that lives around that area where we pinpoint where the seal is. And then essentially what they do, it's kind of like a seal relay race. So they'll drive for as long as they want. Usually it's an hour and a half. And then they'll pass on over with the next rescue network volunteer. So if you do ever end up in Ireland and you see 2 people exchanging a seal in a car park or a co-op, don't be alarmed, nothing dodgy is going on. They're just probably coming to SRI. So that's the first stage of the rescue centre. Then they'll get brought into us and we'll have to do the main part. This takes quite a lot of time. This is the rehab stage. And with the rehab, it starts through a couple of stages, but it depends. It goes from seal to seal. It's not like we have a mandatory way of doing it. But usually it works that we'll first take them into our intensive care units. I've got a picture just underneath there where it says ICU. Essentially what it is, it's a plastic container with drains at the bottom. And we'll put a seal in there, usually just on its own. We won't give them any towels, any blankets, because if we do, they'll probably tear it up and that'll be a choking hazard for them. We'll leave them in there. We'll feed them something called fish soup when they first come in. Fish soup is essentially a blend of herring and electrolyte solution. We usually give this to them because, one, they're not able to eat on whole fish, and two, we just want to hydrate them as much as we can. The way we do that, so we've got some pictures there on the screen as you can see. We put a tube into their mouth, pop it all the way down into their belly, and then we pump through mixture using it that way. It's a lot easier to do it on common seal babies because, like I said, they're a lot more docile. A lot of the time they're only a couple days old, so they don't actually have any teeth. When we're doing it towards the height of the grey seal pupping season, it's actually quite hard to get on top of a grey seal, especially when they've got really sharp teeth and they can end up biting you. And I don't really want to be getting any of the diseases that they've got either. So we do have to wear Kevlar protection while we're dealing with them. So once they're feeding a lot better, hopefully they'll move off their fish soup and move on to whole fish. They'll be moving into either the kennels or the pools, depending on how quickly they're accelerating through the rehab process. But like I said, I think we've got around 12 kennels at the centre and then 4 pools. Each pool is more advanced depending on what stage of the process they're in. So the first pool, which is called nursery, is smaller, it's shallower, it's got less objects in there. As they get bigger, they'll go to the final pool, which is called pre-release, which has actually got 2 parts to it. One of the smaller parts we like to call the jacuzzi, because a lot of the seals just tend to pile in there together. It's quite interesting actually seeing seals interact with each other in a pool. You think they're all going to get on, but they're quite solitary animals in the wild, so there is a few fights going on when they're in the pools. And then finally, when they're at a really good weight, so for around grey seals, that's 30 to 35 kg, and for common seals, it's around 25 to 30. But like I said, it varies on a case-by-case situation. That's when we'll decide to release them back into the wild. So that is stage 3 of the process. I think I do have some videos here just showing you of when we tube feed the seals, so it might be a bit loud, just a little warning. So on the far left, you can see me assisting one of the other interns pumping through some fish soup. The middle one here is me restraining a common seal pup and trying to put the tube down its throat. It may seem slightly inhumane doing a process like this, but they actually don't have a gag reflex whatsoever, so putting a tube down their throat is actually the most humane way to give them food. And then this final video here is a grey seal in its bathtub in the kennel, and we've given him some enrichment, so we've just put some seaweed in the bath for him so you can see him playing around. And then, like I said, stage 3 is release. So one of the main things we make sure we do while we're at the centre is we don't get too close to the animals, we never touch them, we never pet them, and we make sure we don't baby talk the animals either, because we've got to remember they are wild, and at the end of the day we want to make sure they stay as wild as they can so they can be released back into the ocean. I do have a video here of a release of a couple of seals in our care as well. It's funny, even though that seal in the middle went really quickly into the ocean, the other 2 actually took ages to go in. And sometimes they'll go in and they'll actually turn around and come back out again. So they don't actually get attached to us as much as we want them to think. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. If you guys got any questions, please shoot away. Or you can stick around for the end, because I'll stay around for a little bit. Thank you.